Because I think members have picked up really quickly the concerns that some of us had, that why we brought this up in the first place. In that it's all well and good us as a council, and this is, quite rightly, clearly your role at the moment, to ask service users what they think of the service that's designed for them specifically. I think the point that's been made so far, quite eloquently, is actually we want something far more broad than that. Why shouldn't our young people comment on services specifically for our older population? Why shouldn't they comment on the highways? Even though they're not old enough to drive, they use them, they rely on them. And so it is that, I think, more general democratic involvement that we are interested in.
What I'd like to do, just to go back a little bit of history to December of last year, just a year ago. And with the incoming new councils, one of the things that we did in Connections, we looked at where we were in terms of involving young people in democratic processes, and thought, here's an opportunity for us to put together a paper, and to put that paper to Cheshire East and to yourselves, to say, here's a possible way forward, that you could work at the area partnership board levels with shadow groups of young people interacting with the elected members at that level. So we produced a paper, a draft paper. And as we move then into February, we hold each year the annual UK Youth Parliament elections in Cheshire. And Cheshire has a very rich history through the old youth service of participation in those elections. And for the county of Cheshire in February last year, we had about 16,400 young people who voted. And not only do we have that system, we have quite a sophisticated system where young people, and Ron will go into more detail about what's going to happen Saturday, 2 days away from today, for the next year. But the UK Youth Parliament, we select young people, or young people select themselves. They then go forward, they put DVDs together of speeches. And last year, one of the things that we did was we thought, well, why don't we actually get the youngsters to say what it is they're really concerned about? What are the key issues that face them in their lives at the moment? Get to a sort of a number of those which are key issues, and then take those out to the electorate and say to those 16,400 other young people, vote on these, which are the most important things for you. Now, it's quite unique for us to do that. And so we did that in February. And the result of that was a young person's manifesto, but it was for the county. It was at the end of the county council, but it was a young person's manifesto. But importantly, it was about what was really important for them. And you wouldn't be surprised to hear that the things they were most interested in, still are around transport, safe places, knife crime, things to do, places to go. It was those sorts of things. The UK Youth Parliament then was elected, and that was one process. Mike Jones, the leader, came along and spoke to the prospective candidates, and there was an involvement at that point. And then there was a fairly slow period where the strategy document that we put together didn't really go anywhere for the reasons that Neil said, which was because you were coming in as a new council, the new officers were coming in. It's now moved on quite a bit since then, and Ron will talk about that. So that was the UK Youth Parliament side of things. The other side of what we were trying to do was to maximise young people aged 13 to 19 who were involved in consultation activity, a whole range of things. And various elected members have contacted to see if we could put on small consultative activities about different subjects. And they range across the whole piece for different things. We also, to go back to Councillor Brown's view, wanted to put the control of the youth clubs into young people's hands. So the management committees in youth clubs, something we're really keen to do, to put them in control of the programmes, the activities, working with the youth workers to do that. And the other thing we gave the power to young people to in the last 14 or 15 months was the Youth Opportunities Fund and the Youth Capital Fund, which is where young people bid themselves to a fund, a government fund, and young people act as our Cheshire West and Chester young people act as judges over who to allocate that funding to for what reason. So we've got a really strong process, not only of allocation of funding that puts on activities in local areas, but also then goes and quality assures it. So there's a bit about young people being funders, there's a bit about young people being deciders in terms of the activities they want, but the bigger picture, which is what I think you're interested in, is around young people taking on the mantle of being much more involved in their local community, local democracy, and that's where we've got the model of the Senate that you mentioned earlier, which Ron will talk a bit about. If we can, we'll also just mention what's happening for the UK Youth Parliament decision-making right through to the election process at the end of February 2010.
I won't test your patience for too long, but I would like to just say something about what I believe participation is, really. And that's it's people having an equal share in the responsibility. So when they are asked for their opinions, there is a responsibility on young people to actually reflect not just their own opinion, but their peers' opinions as well, really, so that we get a broader picture. And on Saturday, we have our selection day for UK Youth Parliament candidates for the 2010 election. And we've got about 40 young people coming to Northwich. We had a similar number for Cheshire East last week. From the 46 will be selected to go onto the ballot paper for the election, which runs from January the 11th to February the 12th in all the schools. 2 of the young people will become members of the Youth Parliament, the other 4 will be deputy members, but the whole 6 will be the Cheshire West and Chester UKYP team. And they will have a number of amazing opportunities, really. In the last 12 months, our MYPs have been interviewed on the Today programme on Radio 4. They've met Jackie Smith when she was Home Secretary. They've had consultations with councillors here. They've been to events which have had chief police officers, people from the Home Office to do with why do young people get drawn into extremist groups. So they get a remarkable range of experiences, and hopefully at the end of the day this enriches them to the extent that they actually feel that they've got some sort of future in representative bodies. So as the Vice Chairman said, we would like to see ultimately people actually as elected members. And I think that we've got a number of people this year, for instance, who really do seem to be heading that way.
Essentially, these people are self-selecting, aren't they? Because in order to stand for the Youth Parliament, you nominate yourself. And it's only at the end stage when schools and students are invited to then vote for the final 2, essentially. My concern as part of this, and clearly perhaps the Senate will resolve this, things we'll talk about in a minute, my concern is what we have at the moment and what appears to be carrying on is a self-selected group of students, and those who self-select are obviously going to be the most interested to start with, although not necessarily meaning they are the ones that would benefit the most from it. But so in part they're self-selected, and they then have a series of experiences that are primarily of benefit to them. Now, that's how I read this so far. I'm not being critical, because that in itself is not a bad thing. What I'm saying is, what I'm asking for is, where can we take it from here? So my question would be quite basic, really. What do you see the Senate as actually doing? What's its role? What's its function? What's its power? And this vision that you have, this vision that has been shared with some, what is it?